Welcome to the weekly Kansas Reflector video. I'm Editor-in-Chief Sherman Smith.
I'm Baya Burgess, the summer intern.
As you may notice, Clay Wirestone is not here. We decided to let him have a vacation for once. So Baya's filling in. How's it going, Baya?
It's going really good. Right now I am covering the Board of Education race, covering all the candidates running. The governor receiving some clemency requests, so she's responding to those. And then I did a story about ice in Kansas.
That's right. All of that just in the past week. We've really thrown you into a lot of different things during this internship this summer, and you have some exciting stories coming up. So let's talk a little more in depth about some of these. Tell us what's going on with the Board of Education.
Yeah. So there are 5 open seats every 2 years. 5 of the 10 board seats open up, and the State Board of Education essentially oversees public education in Kansas. So none of the 5 Republican incumbents in those seats up for re-election are seeking re-election, and all of those, because they're all Republicans, there is a chance that the GOP majority could be flipped this year.
Could be flipped, and no matter what, it's going to be a very different makeup on the board because we'll have 5 new members, Republican or Democrat.
Yes, that's right.
And so you're going out and you're trying to talk to each of the candidates on both sides in each of these 5 races for the state board. What are some of the things you're hearing from candidates as you talk to them?
Yeah, a lot of the topics that they're talking about, one is reading. Most everyone is really concerned with literacy.
Yeah.
Literacy is really low. I've heard that more than half of Kansas students are reading below their grade level.
Yeah.
Something else that they're concerned with is digital technology in schools. So the legislature last session passed a cell phone ban. Most of the Republicans really agreed that the legislature was stepping in because the state board wasn't making a decision. A few Democrats I spoke with said that it was an overreach from the legislature. And then
kind of a hot button issue because there's an understanding that technology can be a problem if kids are looking at their phones all day, but a lot of people felt like this should be a local issue that should be handled by teachers at a school by school basis.
Yes, exactly. But most everyone across the board is concerned with digital technology in classrooms for younger kids. They think it's too much.
Yeah, just a lot of disagreements about what to do about it, exactly.
That's right.
And literacy is a big deal. The state tried to adopt a blueprint for literacy a couple of years ago and then kind of took the funding away from that program a year ago. What are folks saying about the blueprint for literacy? Is that part of the equation? Or?
Yes, we're talking about it, but most people say it's too soon to tell. So something big about the conversation is how do you measure how students are doing? And they say that it takes a really long time. It can take years to kind of see a program through and build it up and then see the results. And so everyone's saying, this is something that could be really, really great, but it doesn't have the funding, and so it's sort of an unknown, and it's really new.
Well, let's go on to the next story here, which is about the time you were starting your internship, there was a push to get clemency for everybody who's on death row in Kansas. They sent the applications off to the parole board. Those are making their way to the governor kind of one at a time. Do you know how many people are on death row in Kansas?
9, but there are 8 clemency requests.
8 clemency requests. Well, fill us in on what's happening with those.
So the governor has received requests for 3 people so far. So 8 are sent in, but it's sort of a process. She has denied all 3. So the first was a few weeks ago, and he was responsible for a few murders of women. If you recall, he was the one
he was putting them in barrels.
Yes, it's so terrible. And then the more recent 2 were the Carr brothers. The Carr brothers were responsible for what's called the Wichita Massacre. It was a several-day violent crime spree. And so obviously this is a really sensitive topic. So on one side you have people like the faith leaders who spoke last week at the State House.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, they're calling for for all clemency requests to be accepted. And
this is kind of a bipartisan issue. Like, there are people on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and Democrats, who are opposed to the death penalty for very diverse reasons.
That's right. And even these were faith leaders, but they're interfaith leaders. So they're from all different kinds of religions, and they're coming together to essentially say that the death penalty in any circumstance should not happen. They called it inhumane and immoral, and called for the governor to just commute all of those sentences. They signed a letter. I think they had 50 signatures from those faith leaders, and they delivered it directly to her office.
A few weeks ago, you had covered, you weren't there in Wichita, Chris Kobach, the Attorney General, he had a news conference in Wichita with some of the family members of victims and urged the governor to reject all of these clemency cases. The governor now has acted quickly to reject them as they reach her desk. You're actually either in the State House or on your way to the State House to cover this group of faith leaders, urging her to do the opposite, to grant clemency. This would not mean that they would get out of prison. It would just mean that they would spend the rest of their life in prison and not be facing the death penalty. But as you're preparing to cover this, she actually made the decision to deny the clemency request for the Carr brothers.
That's right, about an hour before. And Chris Kobach, when he spoke before she received her first one, he said essentially that it was offensive that these requests were even coming in, because so many of the crimes committed by these inmates were violent. And so he was essentially speaking on that, and he was calling for justice, and he sees justice as the death penalty.
Yeah, well, and the Carr brothers are about the least sympathetic figures you can imagine for this cause. Well, moving on, for several weeks, maybe from the start of the internship this summer, you've been tracking a group of ICE watchers, I guess we'll call them, up in the Kansas City area. Tell us what's going on with that.
Yeah, so there's this really sort of secretive network of people, mainly in Johnson County, but around East Kansas, essentially just suburbs or within the city of Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City is the entire metro area. And they are getting together, doing trainings, and then eventually getting people into these encrypted messaging groups where they essentially send out alerts saying there's ICE activity at this location, can someone go record it? And then someone who's a part of that network will usually jump in their car with their phone and try to record the activity. But because of this new law, they're having a harder time.
Do you have a sense of how many people are involved in this group?
Yes, there's hundreds. So it was difficult for me to get really precise information that I could share on a couple of these things. So I know that there are hundreds of people involved. There's groups in Overland Park, Lenexa, Kansas City, Kansas, and several others.
And it's secretive because the stakes are high for these folks, right?
That's right. So they want to make sure that everyone who's involved sort of has the same intentions that they have, and they want to make sure that everybody coming in also knows what they're doing, which is why they have those trainings. So in order to be a part of this network, you have to go through a training where your background is vetted a little bit, and then they tell you these are your rights, this is what not to do, this is how to not escalate the situation, and you need to stay 25 feet back.
I imagine the people in this group would not consider themselves to be like antagonists, right? They feel like they're just documenting what's happening. And you talked to an immigration attorney who talked about why it's important for them to document this stuff.
That's right. So Michael Sharma Crawford, an immigration attorney, told me that it's important to document these things to hold ICE accountable. One of the reasons he gave was that ICE has been conducting warrantless arrests, and a video of the arrest can prove if it was warrantless, because you have to see that actual transaction occurring with a piece of paper. And he said that it's been successful in his own litigation.
Yeah, you wrote about a couple examples, I think, that he gave where video could be used in court to show that ICE agents were not following the law, basically.
That's right.
And that's why I think so many people are motivated to do this. I've heard from my own reporting over the past year plus that ice activity maybe isn't even more frequent than in past years. It's just that ICE agents now feel like or ICE officers feel like they don't have to follow the rules so much, and so they're seeing more of that. And so ICE watchers have filled this void. The legislature responded this year. What does the new law actually do?
The new law keeps people at a distance, essentially. So there's a lot of things at play in the circumstance where this law applies, which some people say makes it confusing. So if you are within 25 feet of a first responder while they are responding and they've told you to get back, and it's a circumstance where your presence is distracting or interfering in some way,
which is totally up to the law enforcement officer to determine if you're interfering.
Yes, it's at their discretion to see what's happening. Something that these ICE watchers have told me is, how do I measure 25 feet to make sure that I'm not breaking the law, while also documenting what's going on, holding the ICE agents accountable, trying to be as close as I can without getting in trouble.
Yeah, and we wrote about this during the legislative session. The Kansas Press Association was opposed to this rule because it puts journalists in difficult positions out trying to cover what's happening in their communities, even totally unrelated to ICE activity. You're out, trying to report on what police are doing in a particular situation. Those police officers can suddenly charge you with a crime because you got too close to them. How are people supposed to know if you're within 25 feet? I think you talked to somebody who said, am I supposed to have a tape measure with me or what?
Right. And they can. That's the point, that they can. But I've spoken with the sheriff's departments and police departments of several areas, and they've said that they have not actually had to enforce this rule yet. But one thing that did come up was last Saturday, a woman was filming ICE, and the agent approached her to tell her to get back.
They boxed her in, right?
And she was in her car, and she was essentially surrounded. And he was standing in front of her telling her to get back. And that's something that I've been hearing, that, what if they approach me? Or that's happened before. ICE officers they're coming at me.
So ICE agents surround this woman and then go up to her and say, you have to get back, you're violating this 25-foot rule, and she has nowhere to go.
Right.
And you have the video from that, which is included in the story that we published.
That's right. It's pretty clear what's going on, so definitely take a look.
I think one of the things that's about this situation, of course, is that you and I had conversations where we decided that you weren't going to be able to go out and actually track this activity in real time, observe the ICE watchers, because it could put you in that situation, which is concerning to me that we have this law, which I believe is unconstitutional. You talked to First Amendment attorney Max Couch. What did he say about the First Amendment issues here?
He said that it is just not narrowly tailored in the way that Supreme Court rulings have sort of said, this is how we're interpreting the First Amendment. A law that has to do with restricting speech in any way needs to be so specific that it is targeting that very particular issue, and not so broad that it's accidentally scooping up other speech in its path. And he said that this 25-foot law is not specific enough, especially at the discretion of the officers with the language that it uses. He called it vague.
Well, these are 3 stories that you've written just in the past week. You're doing lots of great work for us this summer. What else do you have coming up in the week ahead or the weeks ahead?
So I'm going to continue to report on the Board of Education. I've talked with almost every candidate, so that'll continue to come out. And then something really interesting that I'm learning about right now is cultural fire. And so that should be coming out pretty soon. But
what does cultural fire mean?
Cultural fire is a native practice of burning land in order to protect the integrity of native species. And so a group of mainly environmentalists at Haskell, there's 5 people, and they got together and they made this burn plan. And so that's going to happen around early in the fall. It really depends on the weather, but they're going to burn some land out by Haskell in the wetlands, some grassland, some prairie. And they say it's really going to help the environment, and that this land hasn't been burned in hundreds of years because natives have not been able to steward this land. You know,
This is
been
a
the
push
people who
by
came
Native
in.
Americans to reclaim the land
Yes,
and restore it.
exactly.
Kind of interesting. Very good. Well, we'll have that story to look forward to and many more. You can track all of this by signing up for our free daily newsletter at kansasreflector.com/subscribe. That's kansasreflector.com/subscribe. And if you would like to support the work that Baya is doing in our internship, this is funded specifically through local donations. You can go to kansasreflector.com/donate. So Baya, thank you for joining me this week.
Yeah.
We'll see if Clay is around next week to pick it back up.
Thanks.